Yeah, look, it's lovely to be back. I love your community, and it's always a privilege to be here. I want to talk this morning about one of my favourite topics and places. But first, when I was a kid, one of my favourite things was toy animals. I would save my pocket money for them and build my collection and play in the backyard for hours. And it's probably what partly later led to becoming a wildlife ranger, which I did for about 10 years. I think I was just a boy wanting a bigger backyard and bigger animals to play with. But now as a psychologist, I've come full circle and I'm back to collecting these animal toys again that I use mostly with kids, but not only, to illustrate psychological ideas about adaptive behaviours from nature that we all use. Because there's wisdom in nature, there's wild wisdom. And the book of Psalms is packed full of this wild wisdom, particularly when it comes to desert imagery, which was home to these guys, Ibex. It's one of my little toys. Throughout the scriptures, deserts were central to lessons about life, probably because they were difficult places for life where it was just hanging by a thread. But also places for retreat when refuge was needed, and places where God would lead people to prepare them for difficult callings when their existence was sort of hanging by a thread, which it always is, to be honest. We just don't recognise it as much in plentiful times as we do in the desert times. But Psalm 18 was written in such times. Now, as poems, most Psalms can't be linked to any specific time in history. But Psalm 18 is an almost word-for-word copy of 2 Samuel chapter 22, which is an historical account of when a king named Saul was pursuing this guy named David, who used to be a shepherd and was now a threat to him. Or Saul thought he was a threat to him, but pursuing him into a wilderness, which means we can directly link this poem, this psalm, to the historical context in which it was set. And while I would guess show of hands here would produce 0 as to the number of people who've been pursued into a desert by a jealous king, I suspect we can all relate to the feelings that David was feeling and penning sort of onto the parchment of Psalm 18. The images in his words paint this 3-coloured picture of distress as danger from threat and difficulties in life and desert times where there feels like there's no relief in sight. Now, as Mike mentioned, I was a pastor for 21 years, so you're just going to have to excuse me for 3 points that all start with the same letter. Old habits just die hard. But this isn't just because it's a sermon-y thing to do. It's almost like these ideas kind of sandblast you from almost every verse in this desert psalm. David writes repeatedly about feeling in danger from threats and repeatedly about the need from rescue from trouble, difficulty, and repeatedly about dry times of drought, right, when there's no relief in sight. Because they're 3 things that we all avoid and we all try to prevent and we often plead God to remove from our lives. Danger, difficulty, and dry times. In fact, their opposites are safety and rest and satisfaction, which are core human needs. If we never feel safe, if we never feel at ease, if we never feel satisfied, then we just start to malfunction, yeah? It's like they're essential ingredients for just healthy human growth. For healthy brain growth particularly in childhood, you frustrate those needs of safety and rest and satisfaction in childhood, and you set a person up for significant challenges in adulthood. That's why I love working with kids in our clinic. Not just because I get to play with toys, but because sometimes these toys teach them, like this one, as we'll get to, teach them to meet needs that are often lacking in their wildernesses and essential for their development. And maybe for yours. Maybe you feel in danger from some threat. Perhaps a person that you thought you could trust. And that's not the case at the moment. Perhaps from a diagnosis that you thought you could ignore. You never thought it would be part of your story, and you just need to feel safe. Or maybe life is difficult in a way that is leaving you feel like every path ahead is rocky, and you just long for rest. Or maybe someone here is feeling dry emotionally or socially, and you long for satisfaction but just can't get no. Shows I'm old too. Safety, rest, and satisfaction are real needs because they're opposites. Danger, difficulty, and sort of drought, desert times are real experiences that we all know at some point. So, how does this toy teach us to walk through those desert times? Well, you jump down to verse 33 in Psalm 18, and it reads, God makes my feet like the feet of a deer, literally an ibex. He causes me to stand on the heights and provides a broad reach for my feet so that my ankles don't give way. It's kind of a bizarre, obscure verse, right? But the more I explore healthy human development, the more convinced I am that this animal is a key to unlocking some answers about our desert struggles. And it's a key that's scattered throughout the scriptures. Its horns are mentioned dozens of times. Every time trumpet is mentioned, which is always significant symbolically in the scriptures, it's usually referring to its horns. And then the animal itself is mentioned in 2 Samuel 22 and 24 and Psalm 18 and Psalm 42. And then 400 years later in the book of Habakkuk, however you choose to pronounce it, he was a teacher that who basically penned the idea that would become the foundation of Christianity, right? That being right before God is not about living by laws or rules, it's about living by faith. And then he closes his book with this same key, saying that to live by this faith, we need the feet of an ibex. So what does that mean? Well, the original, I'll see if he would just stand there, will he? The original audience lived around these animals. You still see them everywhere in the wilderness in Israel. So looking at their behaviour and anatomy, the original audience probably went, yeah, that is how you survive these difficult times. They got the meaning because they knew the animal. But I think it's a meaning that gets lost on modern audiences for obvious reasons. We don't see them. So let's break down what truths this key animal unlocks regarding these desert problems we face and those refreshment needs we have. So first, regarding danger, David's threat came from literal enemies hunting him down. And yours may be less literal, but no less distressing. Right? This psalm is talking about real and present dangers, not the uncertain and perceived ones, which most threats are, by the way. Most threats that we feel are anxious predictions, not actual realities. They're stories that we tell ourselves about a situation or about a person, often based on past experiences. We usually use the worst of the past to predict the future, sort of what memory does. But it also means we sometimes respond more to our story about what's happening than we do to what's happening. So the first step is sometimes just to simply assess whether the threat is real right now or whether it's something that's projected from the past, whether it's actual or whether it's an assumption. But when the foxes are real, right, when the diagnosis is on the chart, when the termination notice is in the boss's hand, the truth this psalm is teaching is that God tends not to remove the opposition or the threat, but he equips you to face it. He desires to make you sure-footed more than trouble-free, which kind of sucks, I know. I would far rather say that, yeah, God removes that stuff for you, but that's just not how it typically plays out. That said, this psalm, David's long story, our experiences demonstrate that our adversaries, our biggest challenges, are often our biggest teachers. They're often the biggest doorways to becoming the best versions of ourselves, right? And facing them as such makes the challenges, the deserts, no less challenging, but sometimes it makes the inner chaos more quiet, and it makes our actions more sure-footed. To show you the sure-footedness that David was speaking about when he wrote, God, make my feet like the feet of an ibex, I want to show you some ibex escaping a fox, right? This is one of those real threats. This clip kind of gives us a picture that this psalm was painting. If we can play that first clip.
All it can do is wait for one to slip and fall. But these youngsters are fast learners, and they're now almost as sure-footed as their parents. The fox will have to find its meal elsewhere.
God doesn't remove your opposition. He equips you to face it. You see that truth in those animals in that clip, hey? But we might think, well, yeah, but how's that true in humans? It's a fair question when we're facing foxes of a different fur, ones that we might be facing. So let me tell you about Ibex feet, which are mentioned repeatedly in the Bible because they give us clues as to what this actually looks like when the rubber hits the road or when the hoof hits the rock. And it moves us to our second source of distress in this psalm, life's difficulties. So, Ibex ankle joints have an additional 2 padded claws to normal deer feet. And I bet you're glad you missed your Sunday morning sleep in now to come to a talk about Middle Eastern deer ankle joints. But just stick with me. I promise this is leading somewhere more interesting than that sentence sounds. But these claws give them extra grip along cliff edges. Even the toy actually has the 2 little extra claws, which I think is pretty cool. And they have toes that can move independently and can splay to give them greater surface area. And they can place their entire body weight just on the outer edge of one single toe when they're on a cliff face. And then the outer part is hard, protecting them from rocks, and the inner part is rubbery to give them grip and concave to almost form a suction cup. And then the angling of their leg anatomy, their skeleton, also allows them to shift the center of gravity so that directly from the ankles to almost become one with the cliff, as you can see in that picture. It's very cool. Now, they also learn how to climb when they're kids by watching their mum, who purposely takes them on increasingly difficult slopes to upgrade their capability and therefore their confidence, which is a fantastic bit of parenting advice as well. So, what does Ibex anatomy and upbringing have to do with us? Well, on the upbringing, just as the Ibex are equipped with parenting that progressively upgrades their learning on how to escape foxes and how to walk through difficult desert times, so does an upbringing in faith, watching examples set in scripture or learning from wise mentors or counselors. So does that progressively teach us to walk increasingly difficult situations in life. It's almost like, as Paul wrote to the Philippians hundreds of years later, whatever you have learned or received or heard or seen in me, do that. It's like he was saying, come on, Ibex, walk like me. And regarding the anatomy, just as the Ibex has these ankles that allow it to navigate seemingly impossible cliff faces, so will we, equipped with the anatomy to allow us to navigate difficult, seemingly impossible times. It's called the brain, the seat of the mind. Don't downplay what God built into you to help you when you need help. In most English translations, Psalm 18:36 reads something like this, and if you've got it, your version might say, the 36 may say something like this: God provides a broad path for my feet so that my ankles do not give way. Only that's not what verse 36 says in Hebrew. Because think about it, if that was right, it would imply that difficulties mean that God's sort of let you down, hasn't come through for you. Why is my path so hard? Didn't God say he'd make the path nice and wide for me? No, he didn't. The verse actually reads in Hebrew, God enlarges the reach of my feet so that my ankles don't give way. How cool is that? I suspect the English translators just weren't familiar with Ibex ankle anatomy, so they thought it best to translate, make a wide path. But that's not what the verse says, or how life works. It says, enlarge the reach of my feet. God doesn't make our walk less rocky. He equips us to walk the rocks. Oh yeah, that'll preach. God rarely makes your path smooth and rock-free. He makes your feet strong to walk rocky times. Come on, that's good. And when we're talking human rather than Ibex, that means the mind. That's sort of the ankle joint that God's built into you to help you to hold on to the smallest ledge of hope, and to lean your center of gravity into the rock, which is what David calls God at the opening and close of this psalm. The rock. That's the rock to lean into, my fellow Ibex. Which brings us to the third problem, and to another desert psalm, Psalm 42, which you might be familiar with. The opening verse says, as the deer pants, which is the Ibex, pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. It's speaking of thirst, which is the daily concern of all animals living in the desert, four-legged and two. It was a literal problem in the desert, but these words echo through more than just a literal landscape. Desert often defines our emotional and our social landscape too. This is the third type of distress we try to avoid because it's opposite. Satisfaction and refreshment is a need we all share. With Ibex too. In fact, shepherds and nomads in the desert, this is pretty cool, they would locate water by watching where the Ibex go, because Ibex had an almost sixth sense for locating water. We do the same in tracking here, but our Ibex are pigeons and finches. If you see a pigeon flying slow from tree to tree, it's typically that it has a belly full of water. So if you go in the opposite direction to the pigeon, you often locate water. And finches, when we'd find finches, we knew we were close because they never travel far and they always live near a source of water. So I worked with an Aboriginal tracker for a little bit, and he was giving all these amazing little hints. Or if you see a hose, you just follow that and you find a tap. It's so much easier. In Israel's deserts, though, shepherds would follow an Ibex for the same purpose. So when David, a shepherd, wrote, in the same way an Ibex thirsts for water, my soul thirsts for God, it's like he was saying, we locate soul refreshment by following our thirst. Because like animals, our thirst doesn't lie. Even if we often do in thinking what will quench our thirst, more stuff, which is the ultimate lie. There's a truth and a lie. A saying I heard once, this is altering it slightly, but there's a truth and a lie that it's true when you're thirsty that a glass of water will make you satisfied, but it's a lie that 1,000 glasses of water will make you 1,000 times more satisfied. Which is a great desert lesson about our misconception that more stuff will equal more happiness. Anyway, to show you what I mean and to sort of wrap this up, I have another clip that not only shows where the Ibex's thirst will take them, but also shows the reason God made them such a beautiful model for how to walk through difficult times. Now, this clip goes for about 3 minutes, but it is simply beautiful. Watch this.
The rock that was used to build this dam contains essential minerals that have been dissolved in water. Minerals rich in the calcium that these animals need to stay strong. And they'll scale a dam to get them.
In una situazione estrema, diciamo così, di ripidità, la possibilità di leccare del sale è una tentazione fortissima.
Without these salts and minerals, their bones won't grow, their nervous systems and muscles can't function. Movement and coordination can falter.
Io ho abbastanza paura quando sono in situazioni molto ripide e guardo verso il basso, non sono di certo uno stambecco.
There's a strong bond between mother and kid, and the kid will follow her wherever she goes. The Ibex eventually make it to the prize. Salt from the earth, dissolved in water, continues on its journey into their bodies. Where it's used in the nerves and muscles that control dexterous pincer-like hooves.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I know, you just feel like applauding the, the Ibex for doing that, right? So this picture here was taken at En-Gedi, which is an oasis just on the west of the Dead Sea. En means spring and Gedi means wild goat. This is the spring of the Ibex. And it's the location for Psalm 18 and the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul, the soul that thirsts. For God, David the shepherd wrote, as he probably followed Ibex to get to that stream to write the 23rd Psalm. Because like that clip showed beautifully, there are animals that are just innately drawn by a thirst that leads them to the rock. See the imagery? To their need. And I would submit that the reason you may be here is because deep down you have an innate thirst. At a soul level, let that thirst lead you to lean into the rock. We all need safety and rest and satisfaction because we live in a world of danger and difficulty and dry times. I guess if the first Ibex lesson, that's right, to wrap it up, if the first Ibex lesson was that God doesn't always remove your opposition or your threats, but he equips you to face it. And the second, on difficulty, was that God doesn't make your path smooth, but your feet strong. Then our final Ibex lesson on desert times is that God doesn't actually prevent those desert times, but he provides you with a thirst that you should follow, that leads you to refreshment. Communities like this where you can find that. So may we follow it by learning from the Ibex, by leaning toward our rock, and by climbing some new heights even this week. Thanks for letting me share with you this morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have a spare moment and want to stay up to date, it would mean a lot if you could follow us on social media or even subscribe to our YouTube channel. It all helps in getting the good news out there. Peace.